In 1999, Yoshiyama, a doctor of math and biology, fell in love with an artificial life form whom he created inside a computer. A child was born from the union of the couple within computer memory space. His dual nature allowed him to freely travel between the real world and cyberspace, and gave him the ability to control electricity. His name was Pulseman. Around that time, a series of interrelated crimes began occurring on a global scale. Galaxy Gang, led by the mysterious Doc Waruyama, was responsible. Well, that was an intro. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Pulseman. I'm going to say at the start of every video, and there's even going to be text saying this, if you're heavily photosensitive, don't play or watch this because this game is potentially one of the most eye-straining games I've ever seen on that risk scale. So let's not mess around, let's get right on into the game.
Climb in progress.
Alright, so Pulseman kind of works on a Mega Man-esque scale in that you have multiple stages you can select at a time, although you're limited by which stages you can play, by which point in the game you're at. For instance, right now we can only select stages 1 through 3, and we're going to go through them in numerical order. Stage 1, Galaxy Gang plans to use electromagnetic waves from a TV station to control people. Over the years, I've seen people compare Pulseman to a blend of Sonic and Mega Man, and there's some credence to that because not only can you choose stages and does Pulseman not only look like a robot master and sound like one, but you can get some good speeds with him. But his main mechanics don't really reflect either of those series. When you're just walking around normally, you can slap with your hand, you can do a jump kick by holding up on the attack button and do a little slide kick or a roundhouse on the floor, kind of like Mario in 64 by holding down the attack button. But his main thing is running to gain speed and then entering the electrified state. At that point, you can do his main abilities, which are the flash arrow, I believe it's called, which is where you send a little projectile forward, which is your standard attack, and the Volt Tecker, which I've heard some people call the Volt Tackle, technically accurate with how it sounds, but it is called the Volt Tecker even in the voice acting, which, yeah, this game has voice acting on a Genesis. It's also kind of impressive. The Volt Tecker, the way it works is you move at a 45-degree angle from your launching point, but if you hit a wall, you bounce away from it at a 45-degree angle over and over again until you run out of walls to bounce into. Essentially, your timer in Volt Tecker is limited. When you hit a wall, it resets. So if you're in very narrow straights, like small hallways, you can get some pretty good speed with it. The main balance of Pulseman is keeping up good speed and moving around the platforms using said speed. With that said, Pulseman's not a very beefy character. He can only take 3 hits, signified by the watch in the top left. We're in blue state, so we can take 3 hits. When you get hit once, it's knocked down to yellow, twice to red, 3 times, you are dead. There are power-ups throughout the level that are hearts and these little jar things that can restore your health to by 1 level, but there's never a full health recharge. As for what you can get in the game otherwise, though, there is a power-up that can basically give you infinite Volt Teckers, but there's only in a couple of stages. The main thing you're going to be finding is spark balls, the little red balls with the lightning bolts on them. You get 10 of those, you get an extra life. I can say Pulseman isn't exactly a hard game because of the amount of lives you can get if you just gather things along the way. And there's not too many instant kill variances in this game, at least that I feel are a major threat. Maybe the last level notwithstanding. Now, something you're going to see me abusing to hell and back throughout the LP is a little dash forward. That's the only real quote-unquote secret ability. You double tap the D-pad forward in either direction and you'll dash that way, which not only gets you some good distance, it can even also help you go over some small gaps in platforms like that. But the moment you do it, you're immediately put into the electrified state, meaning you can immediately Volt Techer or do the Flash Arrow. Doing this is pretty key for making boss fights the issue they shouldn't be. With that said, there is some adjusting to do if you're compared to playing some other platformers when it comes to that. Now, before I go into any further mechanics or minor story things, something I should address. People familiar with this game's history will have noticed something. There's English text in this LP. That's not usually there. Pulseman was a Japan-only Sega Genesis game, barring a brief period of availability on the American Sega Channel, that subscription service that we also got Mega Man The Wily Wars through and such. So that's not usually there. The English voice acting is there no matter what, but the English text not so much. This is a fan translation patch created by, I believe the group or person's name is Mejet. I just found it through romhacking.net, as I'm sure many people have throughout the years. Just feel I should probably drop that before we talk about anything else. Now, story-wise, there's a bit the game doesn't go into itself in terms of the background. For instance, the program that Dr. Yoshiyama went into the digital world and made Pulseman with is named Sea Life, and that's, I believe, the name for the electronic beings that we're facing throughout the game, period. But Doc Wariyama, the villain of the game, is also Doc Yoshiyama. Essentially, I think it's like living the computer world messed with his mind and changed him into what he is now. His name is literally the same thing they do for Waluigi and Wario. They just put the Waru thing in front of it. With that said, time for the first boss, this wireframe hand. This thing can be a little dangerous because its attack pattern is a little bit hard to predict. It can come from either side, sweeping the platform out from above you or under you, depending on where you're trying to be in the stage. It can do a slam on the ground and some other things. The big thing you want to do is grab your Volt Techer electrified state via the dash and try to flash arrow it from a distance. The more HP damage you do to it, it gets to yellow, then to red. It's essentially like Sigma from the end of X2. The kick can actually come in pretty handy here, but the big thing you want to do is probably stay towards the center of the stage, because if it's going with the sweep across the bottom or top of the stage, you're not going to be able to figure out that until you've already hit by it, if you're by an edge, more than likely.
Great job!
And that's the first boss down. Technically not done with the stage yet, though, because we need to give this guy a hearty little slap on the knee for being a dick. Stop that. Serves you right for being evil, I guess.
Due to the efforts of Pulseman, the case was completely solved. Stage clear.
You know, I'm impressed that voice acting is as clear as it is on a Genesis game. With that said, after every stage, you then get to do a bonus stage. You ever play... What's the name of the NES game? Arkanoid? I usually think of it as Brick Breaker, because of some other things I played over the years. But you're essentially having Pulseman go into his Volt Techer state and breaking every brick on screen that you can. You get points here no matter what, but you get a bonus if you break every single block. There's also usually some Spark Balls here to help you get some extra lives and all that. The early stages are very easy to get perfects on, the later ones not so much. Now, I should apologize a little bit. The bit rate in this video is probably gonna shit the... Or this LP, rather, is probably gonna shit the bed at some points. Because whenever the screen gets super staticky, there's not much I can do about it at that point, honestly. Either way, on to stage 2. The rainforest is being devastated. They intend to mechanize nature. Now, if there's something I can give Pulseman, it's not a very long game. There's only 7 stages of roughly equivalent length. But I think they do a good job of distinctifying themselves not only visually, but they also do a good job at having some unique mechanics in each one. And we even get introduced to a new one here, the rails. If you press your Volt Techer button, which it says press A there, but I don't have that map to A. I changed that in the options menu at the start of the game, I think to C. If you either Volt Techer into it or you press that on top of them, you'll enter an electrified state that you can use to damage enemies or even clip into certain boss hitboxes. You'll ride alongside the rails from one end to the other. You can jump off of them by canceling the Volt Techer, or you can also swap to rails that are right next to each other by using whatever D-pad is facing them. Like right now I can press right to swap over to this one, or up, should the case be, or down, whatever button you need to press, really. Now, I should also reiterate, again, stage 1 isn't too bad with it, barring maybe the boss fight a little bit. If you are photosensitive, either be careful playing this game or don't, because the backgrounds start to get a little ridiculous. Sometimes the bosses flash heavily when they get hit. I'm thinking the final boss especially flashes the entire screen. Things just aren't very good for you if you're that. And admittedly, technically not the first time these developers will be tied to a case of that. Because the developers behind this are Game Freak of Pokemon fame. This was the last game they made before they went off to basically just mostly be the Pokemon developers, barring things like Little Town Hero, I think they were Drill Dozer, very minor side projects notwithstanding, more or less. And that's also why I believe Rotom, the Pokemon from Gen 4, is an intentional visual and method reference to Pulseman. Because not only does he look like him, the whole electricity and taking over machines mechanic is very in tune with this game's spirit. I want to say they may have also been designed by the same person. Let me double check that. Yes, they were, and it's the big one. They were both designed by Ken Sugimori. And admittedly, not the only reference to Pulseman in Pokemon. Volt Tackle, the move I believe that was introduced in Gen 4 alongside Rotom. At least I think that was Gen 4. Looks quite a bit like the Volt Tacker, which that could be a coincidence admittedly, but most people think it is a reference to this, I believe. It is nice to see developers reference their past with stuff like this, and hell, they even do that in this game technically a little bit, at least on like the programming level with certain explosion graphics being reused from their prior Genesis game, which was a semi-puzzle platformer starring a witch, if memory serves. I am not too familiar with it. It's always nice to see how some developers that are known for one major thing did before their one major thing. Heartwarming in its own way, really. Now this screen, I believe, is the longest in the stage, and I believe the way Pulseman works is that if you die, you're sent back to the beginning of the screen you were on, more so than the beginning of the stage. At least I know that's how it works for boss fights. I believe it works like that for the rest of the stage. You also might be wondering why I didn't take damage on those spikes a second ago. That little bit of a thing I mentioned where if you press the Volt Tacker button when you're not electrified, is you kind of just phase in and out of electricity. Sometimes that does weird things with your hitbox and makes you invincible. I abuse that on a couple of bosses, actually, to basically completely cheese them. But you can also use that to avoid damage from spikes and other hazards. Sometimes it's a little inconsistent. I'm not very good at timing it outside of those boss fights, really. It's technically unintended, but oh well. Also technically unintended is the end of the screen is technically considered the end of the screen no matter where you touch it. And you can clip above the stage in a lot of instances in this game. You'll actually be seeing that coming up in a moment here. And the entire reason I do that is they know you can do it. There's even a extra life hidden in an area like that later on. And there we go. Skipped over a minor section down there. With that, now we're at the boss fight, which is an electrified tree. This thing can only be damaged by the Volt Tacker. Some boss fights can be damaged by your other attacks. This tree, not so much. You need to hit it straight through the center to do some actual damage, though. As for its attacks, it can send its roots doing a little bit of a jump rope motion across the bottom of the screen, or it can try to hit you with a wrecking ball of sorts. I believe that's it. It'll teleport, quote-unquote teleport, across the screen semi-randomly. It'll try to get close to you, I find, usually. The big thing is because of its moving up and down through the screen, finding space to either get enough speed up to enter the Volt Tacker state or to dash without running into it directly and getting hit can be a little troublesome. With that said, you can also use the dash to clip into it. Only about, I think, 3 to 5 Volt Tackers and it's done. It's not a very long boss in any regards, really. And that's stage 2. I think it's harder than stage 1, yes. But I feel it's also a little bit easier to digest because there's mechanics here that they introduce at a good rate. Because you have to basically, in stage 1, just get thrown into all the mechanics at once. Stage 2, if you're going in numerical order at least, you know what you're doing, so there's just one new mechanic added. Now, the way the blocks work in this game, I'm a little inconsistent on because sometimes you'll just clip through them all. Sometimes, at least the destructible ones, you can just clip right through them like they're made of butter. Other times, you will be bounced off them. I want to say it depends on whether or not they are solid or if they're slightly checkerboarded, but don't quote me on that. It also might just depend on what stage they're in, period. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to be tackling stages 3 and 4 where things get a little more interesting. See you guys then.